He's quoted as saying, "Birds sleep best in their tombs." Wonder how his brother feels about that. This week we take a look at the Curator of the Sands, Nasus. Welcome to Runeterra Tourist. My name is Patrick. I don't know anything about these people yet, so let's learn about them together. Renekton's episode was one side of the coin, and this is the other. So if you're curious about the Butcher of the Sands perspective on things, make sure to check out that video after to compare notes, if you will. And before we get started, welcome to all the new subscribers. Thanks for joining. And if you haven't already, make sure to do the whole like and subscribe thing. And if you're on mobile, make sure to swipe and hype the video. It helps expand the reach of this video to other new users. But either way, I really appreciate everybody's support. Thanks so much. Okay, with all of that out of the way, early impressions before I even dug into any of this was that this was just some big dog with a big stick and washboard abs for some reason. I don't understand that one, but I also genuinely didn't expect a librarian or some freaking nerd. Also, I've actually run into this deck a few times at my local game store, so unlike most episodes, I actually kind of have a perspective as far as it performs on the table before I even dove into the lore of this one. In Riftbound, he runs Calm in Mind, or Green and Blue, which makes a lot of sense. His brother is Fury in Body, and in development, he was simply called Anubis Head. Very elaborate there, very descriptive. But you can see that character is clearly inspired by the Egyptian god. As previously mentioned, we already saw Renekton's side of things. So what is Nasus's perspective? Born in Shurima City during the Empire's Golden Age, it's believed that his age is somewhere around 3,800 years old. So fairly young and spry for a League of Legends champion. He had memorized and critiqued the great works of Shurim in history and philosophy before the age of 10. His younger brother Renekton bored pretty easily, and so he would seek out other children and fight them, and so Nasus, being close to his brother, would always try to keep a close eye out for him, making sure that he stayed out of trouble as best he could. Nasus went to the prestigious Collegium of the Sun, where he earned his English degree and worked at a coffee shop while he was working on his screenplay. Just kidding, he obviously studied military strategy and logistics and became the youngest general in the history of Shurima. He was a competent soldier, but his genius lay not in fighting the battles, but rather in planning them. Riot describes him as a deeply empathetic man, and the evidence that they provide are startlingly unglamorous. Basically, he made sure that his soldiers were provisioned, paid on time, and well fed. That's some accounting or human resources kind of stuff right there, focusing on payroll. When Renekton enlisted, it was Nasus who arranged it, because officially his brother was too young to actually join, and so Nasus conveniently had them overlook a few of those details. So an accountant that cooks the books, I guess. His reason is that he feared Renekton's violence would lead him to prison or an early grave. He guided the Emperor's mortal armies to countless victories, and he was respected by everyone under him. The thing is, he actually didn't enjoy any of it. Sure, he understood the importance of war, but he didn't like it. Beyond the military work, Nasus curated the Empire's great libraries or compiled or translated many of the finest literary works of antiquity. Shurima was an empire of conquest, and Nasus gathered the books and artifacts of these peoples that they conquered and put them somewhere safe so that they could preserve their cultures. So the British Museum Defense. Though I'm making jokes, Nasus certainly believed it and thought that he was ensuring that the wisdom and enlightenment would be brought to many generations to come. After decades of service, Nasus contracted an incurable wasting illness that was so terrible that the physician only gave him a week to live, and the emperor himself pleaded with Sataka, of the ascended hosts, to weigh in the deeds of this Shurima's brightest star before the sun disk. Now, I had already talked about Ascension and the sun disk and the Renekton episode, so be sure to check that out for a deeper explanation. After a day, Sataka's emissaries confirmed that Nasus was worthy of Ascension, and the whole city had gathered to see him off, except he was too weak to ascend the dais himself. Renekton hurried back to the city to be with his ailing brother, picked him up, and risked getting incinerated by bringing him up to the sun disk himself, expecting to be completely destroyed. But both were remade. Nasus into this jackal-headed dog creature and Renekton into a furious crocodile. And from Nasus's perspective, he's lucky to be alive given that his brother volunteered to die for him. But he received numerous gifts: immortality, no aging, no need to eat or sleep, regeneration, strength enough to break buildings, the ability to grow enormous in size, and this aura that ages enemies to dust. That last one's terrifying. But the boon he actually valued was time. Now he had lifetimes of it to be able to study and contemplate. But over time, what really begins to concern Nasus is the increased savagery of his brother Renekton. And when the northern coastal city of Nashrame is captured, his brother goes on this rampage and destroys the Grand Library, completely annihilating it during the siege of the place. And hearing this, Nasus returns to the scene to confront Renekton, causing his brother to turn away in shame under the stern gaze. The continued war with the rebel state of Acathia causes Nasus to undertake centuries of reflection and solitude, and he tries to figure out what happened to his descended brethren who morphed into these hollow figures really quick to anger. Eventually, Great Emperor Azir is to ascend, but it goes horribly wrong due to Xerath's betrayal, and neither brother was there, being more than a day out, so when they arrive, the city is ruined and the sun disk has been drained. They fought Xerath, who became this malevolent being of pure energy, but they couldn't kill him. Renekton wrestled him into the tomb of the emperors and ordered Nasus to seal them both in. Nasus had refused, searching desperately for any other way before finally giving in. With a heavy heart, he had them both entombed, sealed away for eternity. The sun disk fell, and every remaining god warrior could do little to restore the empire that is now falling into complete disarray. The divine water stopped flowing, death and famine took over Shurima, and the Ascended began to fight amongst themselves. Nasus feels tremendously guilty for all that has come to the Empire, lamenting what was lost, and perhaps seeking to atone for Nashrame, Nasus withdraws himself entirely from the goings-on in Shurima. The color story, Ouroboros, is short and kind of strange but oddly compelling. It opens on Nasus walking during the night in this period of self-isolation, with a boy following in his wake to a place called the Astrologer's Tower. It was particularly strange to roam the desert with this boy, but Nasus found an odd comfort with this traveling companion and chalked it up to the endless cycle of existence. They came across people fearing that they were nomads, but they turned out to actually be worse, mercenaries and riders, claiming to be sent by an emperor, except the empire had fallen. The rider claims to be with Xerath and produces an amulet seeking to work with Nasus, surprisingly enough. The boy grabs a rock and hurls it at them, much to Nasus' chagrin, and he shouts at the boy named Renekton. The raider's facade vanishes, and the boy actually vanishes. Being snapped out of this haze, Nasus completely takes them out in graphic detail. But then the sun disk arises, Azir is reborn, and Nasus is stunned. Although, of course, he is, according to the story bloodline, grumbling about the fact that they don't build him like they used to when he looks at the rebuilt sun disk. Upon learning that mortals rediscovered the Tomb of the Emperors, he knows that while he's unsure how it happened, Xerath is free. But it also means the possibility that so is his brother. Hope stirs in him for the first time in millennia, with this hope of getting his brother back. He seeks out Azir, seeing him as the key to defeating Xerath. He later fights Xerath himself briefly in order to buy Sivir and Talia time to escape with these civilians who were trapped. Interestingly enough, his connection with Sivir is that for decades he fought alongside Sataka, the warrior queen of the Ascended Host, whose blade, the Chalikar, was once thought to be lost, but then ends up in Sivir's possession. So he occasionally helps her out. It's interesting how the greatest boon of Ascension, this longevity that gave him countless lifetimes of study and reflection and contemplation, ends up being a curse after Shurima fell. he got his unlimited time to read, but then after everything he'd written about and the library that he built, every person he knew, and all of them turned to sand, he had unlimited time to think about that instead. And Nasus is never made aware as to why his brother wants to kill him. But this is a huge departure from the original version, which is just weird. In the old version, he is a part of a race of some animalistic creatures, and they call him the Keeper of the Sands, but then turn that into Curator in another revised version. And he's fighting his treacherous brother, although they never explain why that is or why they're fighting. Maybe Renekton took one of his toys, I have no idea. And then mid-battle with his brother, he is yanked into Runeterra by some summoners, and he looks around, decides that this world has injustices of its own, that he needs to fight for them, and he settles in Shurima because the deserts remind him of home. And then the rumors reach him that Renekton is there too. What? And a fun fact, in Legends of Runeterra's loading screen, it claims that, according to Renekton, Nasus secretly reads trashy romance novels. So there's that. But this seems like a great time to get into the cards. In League of Legends, Nasus is a tough fighter and a tank, and a lot of what he's built around involves increasing damage incrementally while also regenerating health. The passive Soul Eater steals life from the enemy. Siphoning Strike empowers the next attack with an uncancelable wind up and deals bonus physical damage. Wither ages the enemy, increasingly slowing and crippling them over time. Spirit Fire unleashes Spirit Fire that does magic damage and reduces the enemy's armor. And the ultimate, Fury of the Sands, causes him to grow in size and unleashes a sandstorm that batters enemies while he gains bonus health, armor, and bonus magic resistance. In Legends of Runeterra, he was released in the 4th set, Empires of the Ascended, and he's all about increasing his power and health as enemies get slain. Along with that, he has the Fearsome keyword, which means he can't be blocked by units that have a power of 2 or less. He gains Spell Shield upon leveling up, which makes him immune to the effects of the next spell or abilities that target him. So that's a couple of different variants on Nasus. So how does he appear in Riftbound? Starting with the legend card Curator of the Sands, it's the Calm and Mind domain, and he has the ability, when you play a unit, gear, or activated ability with the energy cost 7 or more, you may exhaust me to ready up to 2 runes. Yeah, it's costly reaching 7 runes, and sure, Annie is doing the whole look at what they need to mimic a fraction of our power kind of thing, but once you're there, you're in business. Other than being considered lucky in Western cultures, I'm not really sure why Riot landed on the number 7, but it definitely makes for something interesting to be considered in these early plays, making sure that you don't burn runes so you have them for later. Cards like Astral Heron turn big plays into real value, so you can bank on these resources for empowering or playing more things later. I guess you kind of have to think of it like a refund, where you pay full price and then get some of the runes back afterwards. And in conjunction with said Astral Heron, you can kind of see how the distinction matters for sequencing and like why it feels a little bit clunky before the deck starts to hum. Thematically, I really got nothing for you. Because you're not really stealing runes or points or health or whatever from the opponent, and you're not really increasing the might based off of enemies dying, so yeah, sorry, this is a whole different situation. The signature spell Siphoning Strike is a 4 energy costed spell that says deal 4 to a unit at a battlefield. If you control 7 or more runes, deal 7 to it instead. When it dies this turn, channel 1 rune exhausted. Named after his Q in League, dealing bonus damage and such, and it stacks based off of if it kills a target, stacking even more if that target was a champion or a large minion or monster. I've only ever seen this cast once, and it's kind of funny because in League of Legends, its windup is uncancelable, but it can be defied in Riftbound, so make of that what you will. Most Nasus lists just skip this entirely, mostly because you have those 7 runes earmarked for something else, so by the time you're there, you're not going to want to spend them on a kill spell that doesn't even trigger the legend ability. The only real flavorful thing about this is channeling a rune for a dead enemy unit, which is Kind of reminds me of the stack thing. The rare champion unit out of Mind is Nasus, Guardian of Knowledge. It's a 5 energy, 1 mind power costing unit with 6 might, and the ability once each turn when an enemy unit here dies, channel 1 rune exhausted. The name comes straight from the bio, Guardian of Knowledge and Peerless Strategist, but it's pretty direct to the Legends of Runeterra champion ability, gaining a rune for a dead unit rather than a might boost, which I suggested. But the unit has a power cost, and it's an ability that's fine, but not much else is going for it. Yeah, it doesn't really see play, and most of the units with this type of thing that has a condition on whether a unit dies while it's present doesn't really see any play. So next. Finally, the epic champion unit out of Calm is Nasus Ascended. It costs 8 energy and 1 Calm power for an 8 might unit with the abilities Deflect 2, Empower 8, and when I'm empowered, when I conquer, you score 1 point. So this is the champion unit of choice, and mostly everyone only ever runs one of these per deck list. So scoring the extra point is pretty nice on Conquer, and it is an enormous tempo swing. And trying to get over an 8 might unit is quite a challenge. 8 to cast, 8 to empower, so 16 energy on top of the power cost 2 for the full package, which sure, that triggers the legend ability, but it's a pretty absurd ask. I mean, just to try to get an extra point per conquer. But that's probably why I've seen a lot of these lists run Time Warp for those who can afford such a card. Deflect 2 seems like the spell shield comp, and having your opponent burn 2 runes to target this specifically is pretty costly for them. Getting it out quickly enough is really the deck's problem, and that's a conversation about ramp. So if we're gonna go in that direction, how does Nasus stack up overall? Riot clearly wanted Nasus to be the good guy and Renekton the bad, and yet, even after all of their efforts and Renekton's fairly shallow storyline, Nasus is oddly compelling? Ouroboros is particularly interesting in its very surrealist kind of way, and yet it still feels like it's a part of Nasus, kind of showing what's going on in the mind of this immortal being in self-isolation. Of particular note, he's had numerous different authors. Anthony Reynolds Linné on the bio, Ryan Vinieri on Ouroboros, Graham McNeil on Bloodline, which is why that was so long, and he stays remarkably consistent throughout all of them. Compare that with Shen, who had numerous authors on his numerous works, and he feels as unsettled of a character as any. I wish they dove a little bit more into his bookish ways, and they kind of leave it vague about that aspect, even though he still fights and is a general and fights his brother with the aforementioned six-pack that he's got going on. Not to mention how most of his personality or backstory is not really involved in any of his abilities in League of Legends or Legends of Runeterra. Like, it's not really explained, and they don't really feel like a bookish character like I would expect somebody who is apparently a tank. And purposely leaving it open between him and Renekton leaves some space to explore down the line. I mean, there will be some kind of arcane-like Shurima story down the line, right, Riot? Bringing it to Riftbound, to utilize this legend ability to its fullest, the deck building asks a lot of you. It asks that you build a deck full of expensive things and then survive long enough to be able to cast them. And only then does it really start to help refund those costs and become economical. Contrast that with Annie, who hands you the runes up front at the end of your turn without you needing to do anything. But Nasus reimburses you after you spend them, and you can get them on your turn or your opponent's, depending on if you've exhausted the legend card or not. So whenever you end up spending it, most likely on your turn, but it gives you a little bit more flexibility. In the before times, Calm and Mind seem to want to defensively control and hold battlefields and utilize might manipulation, getting these big bodies down on the board, making them bigger while the opponent's units shrink, and then committing anything to attack them a miserable endeavor for your opponents. Nasus's playstyle kind of goes with that, but the legend ability doesn't really reinforce that. Nasus Ascended wants to conquer, and we've been seeing a lot of these more aggressive builds coming out of the green-blue domains like Lilia from the previous set or the latest version of Ornn that took down Barcelona. If anything, it seems like green-yellow has taken on the mantle of defensive holding strategies. But here, Sprite Queen and Astral Heron really give you the added value engines and in the form of cheap units or resources, respectively. Regarding what this deck does if it falls behind, I mean, that's actually kind of part of the plan in a weird way. There are a lot of smaller units to help with the curve, like Steel Paws, Ravenbloom Student, Stalwart Poro, and Sprite Fountains, but it's really more of a stopgap while it's trying to get the ramp going so it doesn't fall too far behind. The deck wants to put out bigger units than the opponent can climb over and then swing the momentum of the match back in its favor with Sprite Queen, Thousand Tail Watcher, and an empowered Steel Paws. And then Nasus Ascended helping with the Conquer abilities, all of which triggered the legend. If the opponent is too fast or goes wide, Unchecked Power is a board wipe that will allow you to buy some time while you reestablish control, albeit a pretty expensive one at that. Nasus had over 100 pilots in Barcelona, with the best finishing 10-3, going 80th place, and it was roughly 50% win rate across the weekend, genuinely strong against the blue-purple, the blurple decks, but it faltered against most of the meta field. I mean, struggled against Kennen, Rengar, Azir, Master Yi, and even the likes of Draven, Kha'Zix, Fiora. And it was genuinely awful against Aurora in the tournament. I mean, Nasus just too slow, allowing Aurora decks to find their pieces and ramp up before he can punish it. Compare this with the results it had in China, where it actually took down one of the tournaments. Granted, China plays typically in best of one, so this can kind of take advantage of high variance and fields that don't really adapt to it quickly enough. Best of 3 is a different question, and Barcelona kind of showed why. In a recent Nexus night, I was able to get underneath this deck with an Azir deck and beat it pretty soundly. I got to score a lot of points quickly before it could really get online, and then by the time it started to establish a board, I could just wipe it out and remove all of the threats. I was kind of struggling to see how this lined up with his backstory thematically, and it seems like maybe the idea is being able to recover some of the runes that you had spent once you get to 7, deals with the logistics side of him, but overall it didn't seem like it really aligned with anything that he had in his past, nor with his Legends of Runeterra or League of Legends playstyles. I guess that's the accounting figure that he must have learned at the Collegium or something. Overall though, if you are into decks that like to ramp up and have these big massive creatures that your opponent has to handle and typically can't, then this is a pretty good deck for you. To the Nasus mains, how do you think Riot did? And what's your take on their version of him in Riftbound? Let me know in the comments below. Next week, we return to the Medarda family in Naxos, where we discuss all the lore about Mel. So be sure to subscribe if that sounds like your thing. Episodes release every week. And until next time, thanks for watching.